Ko tēnā koutou katoa e taitai mai ana I te tī, I te tā, ki tēnei huihuinga. No hui e te whare kōrero I waka tūai no oanga mō tātou. Kia tuia te here kaupapa, kia tuia te here tangata. Nō reira kei te muka tangata I takia mai Hawaii, hei tēnei kāmei. Tēnei kāmei I runga anō I ngā kātūtanga o te no o tātahi nei. Tēnei no au e no o nei ki tōku tōpito o te awa mitu. Wai oki ko aku rangatira kai I kōrero ka ui mai tērā tōpito, mai tērā tōpito. Ko tī rā e rere toki ana ko aku mii ki koutou katoa, huri no ia hui topa, nau mai, haere mai, e rarau, tēnā koutou katoa. Whakararau mai ki tēnei kaupapa kōrero e pāna ki te puka katapaina, Hine and the Tohunga Portal, nā Ataria Sharman. No mātou te maringa nui kia no o tai I a Ataria I tēnei wā iti nei. Mā reira, ka huri ki a koe e Simon. Kia ora mai tata.
Kia ora, Ben, thanks, man. Well, look, hello, everyone, and hello to everyone out there who's listening. I'm sure there are thousands, millions who are doing it. So look, welcome to everyone. But my name is Simon Minto. I'm an editor, and I edit books similar to the one that we're going to talk about today, which is Hine and the Tohunga Portal by Ataria Sharman. So it's just coming out now. And I'll just before we get in, I'll just say that if you, at any stage, you want to buy the book, which would be a really good idea, you can go on the Huia website. And if you enter the promotion code HINE10, HINE10, there'll be a little banner coming along underneath that will tell you that. You'll get a 10% discount for a week. It's available for a week, so go for it. So look, I'll just very briefly just introduce everyone, but I'll ask you to talk about yourself a bit more. So I'm Simon, and Ataria is the author of this book. Tanya Roxborogh is a acclaimed writer and recently won the preeminent award at the New Zealand Children's Book Awards. Amazing achievement for Charlie Tangaroa and the Creature from the Sea. And Ben Ngaia, who's also featured in the New Zealand Children's Book Awards with his great book, Interior Ngake Me Whataitai. So would you like to just talk a bit about yourselves? Ataria, perhaps, would you like to start off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Simon. Ko whakarara me rangiuru ngā maunga, ko mā tātua me te aroa ngā waka, ko mā tauri tuku mana I te taitokiro, ko kaituna te awa I te rohe whenua o te aroa, ko te tāpui me te pāmu ngā marae, ko ngā puhi me tapuika ngā iwi, ko ngā tikura me ngā ti marukukere ngā hapu, ko Ataria Sharman tuku ingoa. Kia ora, whānau, kia ora the millions. My name is Ataria Sharman, and my iwi are ngā puhi and tapuika. And I'm the author of Hine and the Tohunga Portal, which is my debut novel. I'm also the editor of the arts and culture journal, The Pantograph Punch, and creator of a digital zine called Awa Wahine. And I live in Whangarei with my partner Te Piha Niha, my dog Titi Pia, and my cat Piko. So yeah, that's me.
Great. Tanya, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. So I grew up all over the place. I was born in Christchurch, but moved to the Bay of Plenty and then on up into Ngāpuhi territory. So my childhood, my formative years were spent roaming the forests, the ngahere of Mangakahia, swimming in the Mangakahia River, climbing Hotu Mountain. Ataria, I went to Whangarei Girls High School. It was my old stomping ground, Kamo Intermediate, where I was part of the Kapahaka group, or it was called the Maori Culture Club. I grew up knowing that I was Maori, but in our family, there was a little bit of shame attached to that, or we were probably more proud of our Irish heritage. And so I pretty much ignored that part of who I was until I was in my 20s. And I'm Ngāti Pro, always known that I was Ngāti Pro. Engari, ka reo te mohio he aha taku marae, toku marae. I don't know which marae, hutahi marae, because I don't have the name of my tipuna. E noho ana au ki o Tautahi and Hine. I live out at Lincoln. I teach high school English, and I live with my husband of 32 years and my puppy Coach, who is a border collie. And I think I secretly love him more than I do my 2 daughters. But don't tell them I said that.
Not a secret anymore, is it?
Yeah. So yeah, that's me. Very long-winded introduction. Kia ora. Yeah.
Well, kia ora tātou. Ko te atia o te iwi ko Ben Ngaia tōku ingoa. Yes, my name's Ben Ngaia. Although I live in Te Awa Mitu, I'm actually from the Kapiti Coast, Waikanai, Paraparaimu, where my grandmother's people are from, Te Atiawa. I'm also Te Atiawa on my grandfather's side, from Waitara in Taranaki. I've actually been quite fortunate in terms of my journey within my iwi and our hapu and my identity. My mother is Pākehā, but my father is a proud Te Atiawa. But both of my parents were very passionate about my sister and I pursuing our journey within our identity. So we've been really fortunate in that regard. Both of our parents were very active on our marae, whakarongotai in Waikanai. My grandparents, aunties and uncles. So yeah, I've been really fortunate in that regard. I live in Te Awa Mitu. My wife is from here. We have 2 boys, Te Rongomo and Rāmeka, and Te Waiaruhe. And yeah, it's in terms of what mahi I do right now. I work at Te Wānanga o Aotearoa as a with oversight of program development. So I'm supporting the education initiatives at Te Wānanga o Aotearoa. I really do have a passion, particularly around mātauranga Māori and iwi histories. And that's essentially where I focus my attention in terms of the narratives and telling stories from that particular perspective. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thanks, Ben. That's great. So, Ataria, perhaps would you like to just chat about the book, about just the background to the book and maybe how it came about and whether there were things that started it off or something that was in your mind as you worked on it? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to grab my copy because I feel like I feel more confident talking about it when I have it. But yeah, so Hine and the Tohunga Portal, it's a fantasy adventure for junior readers. So there's 2 siblings, Hine and her younger brother, Hohepa. They're walking home from school one day and arguing, of course, when they unwittingly step through a portal into another realm inhabited by some of the Atua Māori Kia bird tribes, Patupaerehe, moa and giant eagles, so extinct animals, and Aotearoa before a lot of our forests were cut down for farmland. So it's, yeah. But this world is in turmoil, as there has to be turmoil in any story, I guess, fantasy story, as the evil sorcerer Kai has built a cursed army and intends to rule this world and everything in it. And Hohepa is kidnapped by Kai, and because of that, his older sister Hine must find a way to rescue him and save this world from destruction. So that's just a little bit about the book. But I started writing this book when I was doing my postgraduate studies at university. But what I think inspired me was when I was growing up, I remember reading some pūrākau, like Ranginui and Papatuanuku, some of it atua, but not others. And so I think that I wanted to write this story to bring some Māori concepts, narratives, and characters to younger readers that I feel like I wasn't able to read when I was younger. But in saying that, it's written for younger readers, but I do believe that hopefully anyone can enjoy this book. I'm sure Tanya and Ben might be able to kōrero to that later. And I started writing it so that I could enter into Te Papatupu. So for the people who are watching, if you haven't heard of it, that's a program for Māori writers who have a draft and they're looking for development to get publication ready. And I remember getting the first email newsletter for the competition and thinking, oh yeah, I'll do that later. Because I really wanted to enter something. I actually hadn't been writing creatively since college, since like full form English. But I just felt like I really wanted to do something. But I didn't do anything for ages until I got the next email saying the competition's closing in a month. And then I was like, So for 30 days, I literally got up early in the mornings, like sometimes 4 a.m, and wrote the first half of Hine in the Tohunga Portal. So that was kind of an interesting experience. But so anyway, I was selected, which was really quite a miracle probably. And I wrote the second half of the novel during the Te Papatupu program and under the mentorship of Simon, who's here today, which was awesome. Really appreciated all your help on that, Simon.
Thank you.
And thinking back on it, I actually wonder if it was procrastination, because I was doing my master's thesis, which is 50,000 words, an academic thesis. And then thinking on it, I'm like, there's nothing, like the one thing worse than maybe writing a novel is probably writing a 50,000 word thesis. So it was like, instead of writing my thesis, I just wrote a fiction novel instead. So yeah, that's just a little bit about the book. But yeah, and if anyone wants to get a copy of Hine in the Tohunga Portal, you can get it at your local bookstore or direct from huia.co.nz. And as Simon already has mentioned, there's the promo code for the next week. And also, if you put your questions for me in the comments in Facebook, then which I'll be responding to during this, you can also be in to win a copy of Hine in the Tohunga Portal as well.
Great, thanks, Ataria. That's great. That's fascinating, isn't it? The process. So it could easily have not come about. I suppose the book could easily have. Other things that got in the way, and if Te Papatupu hadn't given you a push, hadn't given you a deadline, maybe. Yeah, great. Well, look, do we just have a quick chat, perhaps, about with the other three participants? If we chat about perhaps what we liked about it, like or our impressions of it, and if there's things we really hated, we thought were just absolutely hopeless. We should sort of be honest about that too. What did you think, Ben? Were there any special parts of it you thought, hey, that's something else, that's really great?
I firstly just really want to acknowledge Ataria. I think she's done a fantastic book here, and it's I really want to acknowledge that it's authentically kaupapa Māori. It's a really well written book, and it explores quite a series of contexts and narratives. I suppose it's difficult for me to kind of go too deeply into this because I don't want to reveal too much, because I want to leave it for readers to kind of peel open the pages and look deeper into it. But one thing that I really enjoyed about it actually was that it took myself on a journey. It began as like a single pathway, and then it diverged off into two separate pathways. There was a sister and a brother that were on two separate pathways which were inextricably, linked together, and they came back together, towards the end. And it also explores particular what I would deem to be called Maori histories. Okay. And it delves into certain characters that are representative, as tupuna historically, and it's actually quite an exciting read, to unpack, the personalities of some of those characters. It really painted quite an interesting picture on, one particular character, Kai, for example, who's always had a little bit of a dark, history, but delved into that quite significantly. For me, and my personal perspective, that was quite exciting. It's quite exciting to unpack that. And I looked at, I suppose, the other certain historical characters, tupuna, in quite a different way to how we commonly understand them today. So I just really want to acknowledge that, and I thought that the two characters, although brother and sister, and their relationship very close, they were very different personalities, as you would expect. Very different personalities. Some of the other characters, you could really relate to. I was thinking of two of the kuia per se, within the book, and I can from my own aunties, in Waikanae we have those aunties. Firstly, they were both really strong people in terms of their views, and really strong kuia. One engaged in you could feel that she had quite a kind of sense of, she was quite debonair, and despite that, had really strong views, and was very steadfast, but was quite eloquent as well, eloquently put. And then there was the other kuia, in my opinion, like some of my other aunties that can be really strong and forceful.
Yeah.
Calls a spade, and and respectfully, is very open about the historical grudges, that they have. But despite that, both of them really showed a lot of aroha, a lot of love and care, and I think that really came through really strongly, despite them being very two quite distinct, quite unique kuia. That's just a little bit I just want to say. I might hand it over to Tanya.
Yeah, I would just like to say congratulations in producing this book. It's beautifully produced, and don't you kind of think that after writing a novel that people should just kind of give you, like university should just award you like PhDs, like, because of the amount of work? Like, I was really interested to hear that you wrote this instead of doing your master's thesis, because I'm doing my master's part-time, and I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be so easy doing a master's research. It's going to be like, man, I've written books, it's going to be so easy. But I think the thing, so I've written down some notes of some things that I want to say about the book. I think, like what you say, Ben, it is really action-packed. And I also love the relationship between Hine and Hohepa. And as you were talking, I guess one of the things that I say to my writing students is, and actually all of my students, is one of the things that you must do with your characters is you must put them in a really tricky situation and then make it really worse, and then basically kick the ladder out from under them, and then stand back and watch them try and struggle out of it, and that under no circumstances must you swoop in and magically rescue them. And I think that that's one of the things that's really going to be very exciting for kids to read this book, is that both characters have to get themselves out of trouble. They are the ones that they've got to find it within themselves. They've got to think of their own knowledge. They've got to find their own determination. They've got to work it out for themselves. Like there's no, even though it's kind of magical and you're in this portal and there's these kind of mythical things happening, you don't rescue them. And that's so satisfying as a reader because it's almost like, and then I woke up and it was all a dream. Oh my God, I hate that ending. Like just that doesn't happen. And I guess the other thing that I always encourage my students to do is, turn the screws on your characters, because readers love to see other people suffer and see how they would get themselves and what would they do. So that was one of the things that I thought was really, really neat about, and what I think would really appeal to young people is there's no adults swooping in and explaining everything. There's no, I know, Ben, you said about, the wise queer, and that's really good, and you get a little bit of the history and stuff like that, but there's no one kind of sitting them down and going, now, Hohepa, let me tell you the story of, and now that's all done within action. Like it's done, like in that scene when he's in with Naro, the Teniro in the cages. There's a little bit of exposition, but there's no time to kind of sit down and have a history lesson because there's too much to do. And that kind of brings me into, one of the questions that we were asked is to think about our favorite part. And I've decided that my favorite part is the scene where Hohepa frees all the animals from the cages. I just like that. It's almost like we're still quite at the start of the book, and we're still holding on to the normality of life on the other side of the portal. So we still haven't quite yet got into fully this world, this realm. I don't think this is how I'm feeling. And what I call is not that I'm saying the book is absurd, but I talk about the arc of absurdity, that you take your reader on this journey and you can't throw them straight in, otherwise I'll go, no, that's not true. You take them through it slowly so that they accept this truth, and then the next truth, and the next truth. And so, talking dogs and climbing on more, and people with no eyes, and it's totally acceptable because of the journey that you take with Hohepa as he experiences these things. So I thought that was really good. So that was my favorite bit. The other thing that I wanted to say about this, and this is I hope you see this as a compliment, is I really felt that there was a sense of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe to the way in which this story was told. My favorite in that series is the Prince Caspian series, and I don't know if you've read that, but the fact that the animals are like, they're characters, but they're different animals, and it's a battle, and there's this, that, and the other thing, and everyone's got their story and everyone's got their issue. So that's what it reminded me of when I read it. And I guess that leaves me with the question that I have for you, that I would be really interested in you talking to me about, because I've written lots of battle scenes in not in Charlie Tungaroa, which is nothing compared to what I've done with my 11th century historical novels. What did you do to learn how to write those action scenes? Did you watch movies? Did you read books? Did you role play with your partner in Dog and Cat? Like, I have to put my hand up and say that I did that with a big teddy bear once while I was trying to work out how to get a dagger out of my boot so that I could stab my assailant while my shoulder was broken. Like, what did we do to work on those action scenes?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's funny so I guess one of my first trainings for battle scenes was, have any of you heard of the computer game Age of Empires?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so it's a civilization strategy battle game. And when I was a kid, me, my brother, and my dad, every school holidays, we'd connect all the computers up and we'd all play together. And so that was literally like growing a civilization and battling. I love The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe a lot. So definitely read that. I don't actually know if I read Prince Caspian, but there is definitely that aspect of going, you know, through the wardrobe into this other world, and there is that massive animal element. But I think also I get a lot of inspiration for me has actually come from, I think, movies like the Battle of Helm's Deep, Lord of the Rings is like my favorite battle. There's that scene, kind of like you were talking about that scene with Hohepa, giving spoilers, but you know, all the animals are running across the plains. A scene in Helm's Deep for me was where Legolas and Gimli are like, oh no, it's Legolas and he's sliding on the shield and he's shooting. So like those kinds of epic moments. So I think movies, but also anime as well. I'm a big anime watcher, and shonen is a specific genre which is a lot of battles. And they have magical powers too. So that, I think that also helped me a lot in imagining things in my head. But then the rest of it, probably I just made up a little bit, I think. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Great. Yeah, that's great. That's a really interesting little thing there. I agree with everything that was said there. That's great. Like the one thing we were going to talk about in relation to this discussion was just the idea of heroism and what a hero is in fiction. And so a hero is usually someone who's usually got a gun or a sword or a wand, and they save the day and do all that sort of things. But the interesting thing just picks up something Ben said about the characters were all, like the whole story, the battle, the events, all that was really gripping, and it all barreled along, but it never got in the way of the human story that Hohepa and Hine were having to find out things that they didn't think they'd have to find out about. And Hohepa was sort of forced into confronting who he really was and who his ancestors were and the way the world had been and that sort of thing. But Hine doesn't have any of those weapons, but she does have a poi, doesn't she? It's the poi. It's not the sword. And I suppose, although the main sort of climax, I suppose, is sort of a point where you can't sort of put the book down. But I did think probably my favourite bit was when she used the poi the first time, after Hine Te Iwiwa had instructed her. So she found this inside her. So it was so the story, to me anyway, always seemed to focus on this idea that it's inside the person. So although the real hard case characters, I thought they were great. Like Ataria is basically a well-meaning psycho, really. And the two Koya, that you can tell there's a real human element to their bickering and bitchiness. But you always had a sense that it was always Hohepa's and Hine's story. And it was, at the end of it was them, not the world that was important. It was them, and we knew everything will be different. Everything will be different from now on. So I thought that was great. I thought that was absolutely achieved in this pretty humble sort of story. It never deviated from the fact that it was about those two people and their relationship and who they were in themselves. I thought it was great. Great.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, Iwa. Just taking on a point that that you know Tanya raised, and really interesting to hear, Ataria, your I suppose the types of things that had influenced your thinking, you know, around those battle scenes. You know, I was also thinking about ariki care, you know, and because interestingly, that behaviour is not too dissimilar to how our tupuna behaved. You know, they would be at loggerheads with each other, but for the greater good, they would, ally themselves, to each other. And then once I suppose the enemy had been vanquished per se, then they would be back to being at loggerheads with each other. And it was just, and that's not unique to Māori, but it's very much a part of the, the historical narrative as well. And also, I think we can really tap into like you have done. A lot of the creatures, that we've have been given life to in this book, there's it's really also a big part of Māori storytelling. We see it in what are some good examples? Creatures that came from the sea, the ponaturi, who came from the sea, who captured Hema. And Urutonga, it's this tāwhaki kōrero, and then Rata, who went into the forest, fell down a tree, and the Hakaturi who gathered around, those creatures, and they're all very distinct, characters as well in the historical narratives, of those, and yeah, so I really found it interesting when you're talking about your influences, because there's some real strong kind of Māori connections there too, that I felt really that came through. Interestingly, and yeah, it was really great. I just wanted to acknowledge that. And what you're talking about, Simon, around the poi, yeah, I mean, that conjures up all sorts of things, for me, it's like the great staff and, swiping around 1,000, enemies that come towards you, but it's a poi, and it was, and you can feel the eloquence of when it's done, and then this energy just kind of boom knocks, all these enemies away. I think it was really well developed.
And I think also, and just in terms of, with my teacher's hat on, and one of the things that I love about story and why story is important is because, in To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch says to his daughter Scout, you never really understand a person until you climb inside their skin, until you walk around in it. And one of the ways that we can get our students, our kids to climb inside is to climb inside story. And we do have Moana, the Disney stories, and we have those, but if we don't have Māori pūrākau that has ancestor and stories of people, real people, and legends, or however you want to call it, but not seen as real people, then they remain cartoon kind of cutouts. Whereas, like, if I think about how Hohepa in particular toward the end, Hine perhaps, when she saw her tipuna, they seeing them as real people, seeing them talk and speak and bicker and things like that, makes them come more than just a storybook, but actually, they were people who are flawed and squabble with their brother and their sister like I did too, which makes them more real, which brings validity to the stories more. Am I making myself sense?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. That's great. So this thing about like I think the central thing of this novel is this idea of the hero, and there are sort of two heroes. And there are lots of brave people who do amazing things and all that, but it's really these two heroes, really, are the thing. And I was going to say, what is a hero, and what is a hero different in fiction? Is a hero different in fiction from a hero in the real world? What we might call a hero a surgeon, or someone who breaks up a terrible battle or fight in the street or something.
Yeah, don't you think it aligns itself with mana? To me, I see it as so connected to the idea of mana. That idea that you take the gifts that you've been given and you use those gifts for the betterment of others. And everybody has different gifts. And unlike Kai, who stands up and goes, look at me, I'm amazing and I'm incredible and la 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 la. Tenero and some of the others are just like well, I'm just going to do what I need to do for the better. It was like we were saying, Ben, for the betterment of others. So I'll use my skills and gifts, if it's song or words or whatever, to help other people. That's the hero. The hero is the person who has the gifts and uses the gifts not for self-serving, not to get themselves out of trouble so much as to make it better for everybody else. And yeah, that's how I see. You know, I've been thinking about that a lot in my own writing. What is mana? Who gets to decide whose mana is more, you know, and yeah, so that's how I think of it, as the hero's journey. And I mean, I've read the books, you know, I have the book The Hero's Journey, and you know, going on an explore, but the European centric view of hero's journey when it comes to writing is self-actualization, self-realization, self-betterment. Whereas, don't you think in Te Ao Māori it's inverse, it's reverse, like it's the, yeah, like I said, it's using your gifts to make it better for others. I don't know, what do you think, Ben? That's my throw it in there. What do you think, Ataria?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, you go,
Yep.
Ataria. You go.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And one of the things I was thinking about is like whakapapa and how our gifts come from our tupuna, but also we are creating gifts for our mokopuna, and so it's like that. So I think, is that where the it's not self-serving, it's serving future generations, past generations, all together. And yeah, so that's just something I thought about.
There was something you said before, Tanya. I really agreed with everything you said just previously, by the way. But it was about Hine and you know, Hohepa, and how relatable they are. You know, they have these internal trials, you know, these internal struggles. You know, they're going down into some dark places, you know, mentally, you know, emotionally, spiritually, you know, and are thinking about things that, you know, from my personal perspective, no doubt I would be thinking about too. You know, what's happening with my sister? You know, will I ever see my parents again? Or, you know, the things that matter most to myself. You know, and despite that, you know, they're still, you know, the will to carry on, you know, the will to, you know, look after those that they've just befriended, you know, the will to, you know, do good, you know, and do good, and, you know, just carry on. You know, it's really powerful and emotional, you know, and I suppose the heroism for me is, you know, that internal struggle and trial, and the ability to overcome significant, you know, odds. And, you know, like what's been described, there's been, you know, they're tapping into certain gifts within themselves that are starting to be developed. You know, like Hohepa, for example, in Maurako, starting to be developed. You know, previous to that, he was kind of just finding, you know, his way. And, you know, gets to a particular point in time under the tutelage, that he's starting to find his feet and confidence. And you can feel the confidence, despite all this turmoil and everything that's happening around, you know, they're starting to, you know, I suppose see the being more aware of those gifts and utilizing them. And yeah, they are utilized for what I would say is the greater good, you know, for their compatriots and so on and so forth that come around them. So yeah, I think that was you know, really well done. Just want to acknowledge that from, you know, Tanya.
Great. I suppose I'd say the thing about the heroism in those two, I'd say I think all that sounds great, really. But I would say that there was that both Hine and Hohepa had their own issues. I think they had their own things they had to face, and by the end of the story, they had been forced to face them. So it was they I think probably particularly Hohepa in particular had a pretty flawed view of the world. It wasn't his fault. It was he's just a kid like you know, but he was absolutely different at the end of it. There's this profound sense that he was a completely different person and he would be a different person now from what we had the sense of him as just another little kid. So I suppose in that sense anyway, from my point of view, I guess I'd say that's a totally satisfying heroic story, because there's still nothing, like in both of them, they're completely ordinary. On the face of it, they're very ordinary characters. At the end of it, they're not shooting their mouth off about anything. They in lots of ways, they're the same, but they're different. And the interesting thing about Kai, the Kai character, is the awful thing about him is that I sort of quite liked it, and I liked him, and I liked it when he was in the story because it was always interesting. He seemed sort of invincible, and I don't know. There's something appealing about a real self-serving arsehole like Kai. I sort of felt guilty liking him, but anyway. So just one thing I was going to say is that a lot of stories, particularly contemporary Māori stories, focus on trauma. They focus on abuse and violence and drugs and all that stuff. But this one doesn't. So I just wonder if is there any thought about that was that a conscious thing you were thinking of, Ataria? Did you want to write a different kind of story, or you thought that story was told, or you just weren't interested, or?
Yeah, it was a conscious decision, and it was because that it was a conscious decision, but mostly just around I wanted the parents to be like my parents were very loving, and so I wanted them to be parents like that. And I think
No, it's just interesting to me that because it just seemed every book I used to read, I've read for the last 20 years, ever since Once Were Warriors, I suppose, has all been about that world, it seems. And I always wondered, there are other stories, surely, not being Māori, there are other stories that surely are out there.
And I think, when, one of the things that I noticed as being a teacher is I have the great privilege of meeting so many families, so many parents, and so many kids, Māori, Pacifica, all sorts, who are not meth using, alcoholic, bikie, they're the real estate agent and the teacher and like I just had a parent teacher interview with a kid in my equivalent to my form class, and like you, Ataria, parents normal, like just want the best for their kids, made, like I just can still see Riley's eyes, him rolling his eyes because his dad made a stupid dad joke, and because we had to do it through Zoom because it was during lockdown, and and he's sitting there in between his parents, and like he's this 17-year-old boy kind of sitting there, and and it's lovely, and it's I think if as a teacher, if I would shy away from books that present such a bleak view, and to me a disrespectful view. I would want to, well, I don't know if it's disrespectful, because I mean, ironically, I kind of ran from that part of my life because that was my story. But I think it's better to offer students hope as well. And also for this age group, you don't want it to be too dark. I mean, that's like why Steph's book with the magician, Whitu Toa, is so much fun, because it's fun. Like, it's fun stuff, and even her zombie books. In fact, like I want to see characters kick butt, deal with hard stuff that could be anybody dealing with hard stuff. Doesn't have to be. Not that there's not a place for those sorts of stories, because there is, because kids do need, some kids do need to see that there is hope and stuff like that. But you can also offer hope without taking it so dark. Like, I hope that I would never ever go into a portal and meet somebody like Kai. I hope that would never happen to me. But I can say that there have been times in my life when I've stepped through a door and I have faced a person who is as nasty and vindictive as that character, and I've had to draw upon my strength and my knowledge to deal with that. And that's what we want from our kids when they read these stories. Don't you think? Am I preaching to the choir, or am I getting off topic?
No, I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. So that's so that was, I was going to sort of introduce that idea of what kinds of stories would kids respond to? Do younger kids respond to this kind of story? Hine and Pohapa story, and is that the sort of stories we want to tell? And how can they be changed by stories? How can kids be affected by, and sort of find those things inside them, the good things inside them, the way those two characters did? How do stories do that? Do they, or can they do that?
Well, I don't teach younger. I mean, I'm a high school teacher, so I couldn't speak to the younger age group. I guess the thing is, everybody loves story. Ataria, you said this too about how your hope would be that your book would be of interest to all ages, and I know that the good readers in my classes love fantasy, love action adventure, love the impossible, the probable set within the impossible. And that's what I think. And I often say to my students that a good book tells you, doesn't have to be real, but it has to be true. That the information or what's happening has to ring true, even if it's not real. Does that make sense? Like, we know that the Lord of the Rings isn't real. It really isn't. I'm sorry if anyone thinks it is. But the sadness and joy and excitement and fear and all of that is true. Is something that we can connect to. We can relate to.
Great.
Yeah. No, I really total what's been said here. I think that the thing for me is, I found the backgrounds of the two key characters, are really relatable, just from my own personal experience. And it's not like my life has been perfect either. Absolutely not. But in terms of their background in kapahaka, the parents impressing kapahaka on the kids, the son and his kind of confidence and how great he is as a singer, versus the sister and how confidently she thinks he isn't a great singer, and then sharing those particular views, walking home from school, trying, making sure that you don't get home too late, or you're going to get in trouble. I remember those particular days, having the kapahaka tutor who was just just full noise when it came to kapa. I remember one at intermediate, we the gentleman who took us, he was a Pākehā gentleman, absolutely passionate about kapahaka, and really instilled that within us. Once again, similar types of things, used to take kids home and all that. It was really relatable, and I get a sense that that's and these are all realities of our tamariki. Simon, but you said before, yep, yeah, absolutely. We're all on a particular spectrum in terms of the kaupapa that we deal from home to home, but this is an example of another reality within that, and I could really relate to that. I thought it was really well done in that regard, and for me, it's it spoke to my growing up, you know, per se, you know, how I remember, you know, my childhood. So I just, you know, just really wanted to, you know, acknowledge that.
Great.
Don't you think also that that for the kids who, whatever ethnicity, the kids, because you know, I read to escape sadness and loneliness, and I know a lot of kids do. That's why they read. That if their real situation isn't a happy one, they can look at books like this, and even though it's in the midst of this huge battle and all these terrible things happening, there's actually the strength of whānau and strength of purpose, and as Ataria said about whakapapa, there's like a model of how it could be or should be. And I know that, like, that's when I was reading Eden Blyton as a child, I looked to that to go, oh, this is, or Little House on the Prairie, because we had no New Zealand books when I was young. This is how a good family could be, you know, like, this is what I aspire to have. This is what it could be. Like, there is out there in the world, there is a place where I can imagine that there would be good people there. And yeah, so that's why I think it's good to have stories like this.
Great, fantastic, thanks for that. Yes, look, I think we could talk for ages and ages. This is really great, but I just wonder, just becoming sort of to the end, would you like to just read a little section, Ataria, just to give us a taste of perhaps what the rest of it holds?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to read a bit. Okay. Sorry, I'm just finding my spot. Marked it. Okay, got it. Okay. Wrapped around the men's shoulders were long, shiny, black feathered korowai. They each had a tire hat in one hand and a patu in the other. Hine stared. Is this real? Hohepa was looking around the circle of men, his face twisted with fear. Hohepa, cried Hine. He heard her call and ran towards her, ducking under two muscled arms. The men turned and chased him. Leave my little brother alone, she screamed as they closed in around him. Leave him alone or I'll call the police. Hohepa yelled out as he was hit across the head. He fell to the ground, then his motionless body was hoisted over his shoulder. The man who had picked him up smiled at her, and Hine screamed. Where his eyes should have been were only gaping black holes. His stretched mouth revealed teeth that had been sharpened into thin points, like the teeth of a shark. Hine's hair was stuck to her brow with sweat. Her breath quickened. She choked on her words. Where are you taking him? She screamed. She fell backwards onto her kumu as the trees began shaking. A roar echoed through the forest, and suddenly, to her disbelief, a giant, scaly beast poked its head through. Pine needles pricked the palms of her hands, drawing droplets of blood. She ignored the pain and screamed. The head of this thing was the size of a small car. Its scales were brown, with grey and red scattered throughout its leathery hide. Again, where the eyes were meant to be, there was only darkness. Hine's mind raced back to the book of myths and legends her mum used to read to her. Is that a taniwha? The taniwha opened its mouth to reveal a pulsating and ribbed red tunnel. The men ran up the pink tongue and down the throat, still carrying the lifeless body of Hohepa. As soon as they disappeared, the mouth shut and the taniwha flicked its tongue with satisfaction. Hine watched the tree line shake as the monster pushed away and disappeared into the forest. The trees settled as though nothing had happened. The dark feeling Hine had felt was gone. She raced after the monster, only to find it had disappeared. She ran from tree to tree until her lungs felt like they were exploding. She felt her asthma creep into her throat. She scrabbled in her pockets for her inhaler as panicked tears wet her arms. Wheezing for breath, she fell to her knees and pounded her fists into the dirt, whispering to herself over and over, Hohepa, 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 Hohepa. Her nose was touching Papatūānuku, Frantic thoughts flooded her mind as she searched for ways to rescue her brother. I need to get help, said Hine out loud to nobody. No one will believe me. What kind of older sister am I? It felt like her chest was going to explode, and when she finally stopped crying, it was dark. She rubbed her eyes. They were swollen and her cheeks burnt. She pushed herself up and felt dizzy. She was grateful for the light of the moon, though much of it was obscured by the trees and their concealing branches. I need to get help. She took one last long look at where Hōhepa had been stolen, etching it on her memory, and turned back the way they had come. Taking a step, she tripped on a root and watched in surprise as the ground came up to meet her head. Her last thought as she slipped out of consciousness was, Hōhepa.
Thanks, Ataria. That's great. Well, look, that's I think that's time. I think so. Look, thanks very much, Ataria, Ben, and Tania. And just to say once again, if anyone wants to purchase the book, you can do it through the Huia website, huia.co.nz, and use the promo code HINE10. Thanks very much, everyone.